So good afternoon, everyone. Dr. Hajar Idrisi, and I'm honored to be moderating today's important discussion on towards a just energy transition in the MENA region. So this webinar is held within the framework of the Just Transition Green Bridge, a 3-year project which aims to empower civil society organizations and locally led initiatives in the MENA region. So with a specific focus on Tunisia, Egypt, Morocco, Lebanon to participate meaningfully in shaping environmental policies. So this action is funded by the European Union program, Civil Society Facility for the Mediterranean, and by the Swedish Institute or the Swedish International Development Cooperation Agency. This project is also implemented by a consortium led by the Arab Reform Initiative in collaboration with Alternative Policy Solutions, American University in Cairo, and Moroccan Institute for Policy Analysis. We are gathered here today with the common goal of exploring the pressing issues and solutions for energy transitions in the MENA region, where the shift towards cleaner, more sustainable energy systems holds the potential to reshape economies, enhance social equity, and combat the challenges posed by climate change. However, we know that the transition to a just energy future requires more than just technical advancements and investments in renewable energy. It must be anchored in principles of fairness, equity, and inclusivity, ensuring that vulnerable populations are not left behind and that energy access becomes a universal right. Today, we have the privilege of hearing from 4 esteemed experts who bring a wealth of knowledge and experience in energy justice, policy, and the practicalities of implementing sustainable solutions. Let me briefly introduce Dr. Karim Shukri, who is a renewable energy expert with over 10 years of experience in project development, policy analysis, and capacity building. He holds a PhD in renewable energy, integration, and an engineering diploma in new energies. Dr. Shukri has worked at the Moroccan Ministry of Energy Transition and collaborated with different international organizations. He also teaches at Hassan II University and has contributed to research and training programs internationally. We have also the privilege of having with us Madame Yasmin Al-Amin, a PhD candidate at University College London and a research consultant at ARI. Yasmina's work focuses on a decolonial approach to energy justice, particularly in Lebanon and Tunisia. Her research integrates themes of climate change adaptation, migration, water management, and sustainability transitions. Yasmina will speak to us today about the situation in Tunisia, and since Yasmina is Lebanese, she will also provide a nuanced perspective on the energy challenges and opportunities in Lebanon. We have also with us today Mr. Ratman Amin, is a senior associate at Unity, where he specializes in energy, infrastructure, and project development with significant experience across Africa. He is here today to discuss the Moroccan context, focusing on Morocco's energy transition efforts and the role of policy, infrastructure, and financial mechanisms in driving forward the country's energy agenda. We have also with us Mr. Ahmed Zahran, the co-founder and CEO of Karm Solar, an Egyptian joint stock company established in 2011, working in the field of off-grid and on-grid solar innovations. He holds a master's in economics from South University of London and a BA in business administration and finance from American University Cairo and a certificate in social entrepreneurship from the Stanford Graduate School of Business. We will have also approximately 15 minutes dedicated to addressing questions from our audience. And to ensure a productive and inclusive discussion, I encourage attendees to submit concise and clear questions through the designated Q&A feature on your screen. And please specify the speaker your question is directed to, if applicable. Please, if you need interpretation, you just need to press the button interpretation to have Arabic interpretation directly. For our webinar today, I will ask questions on a rotating basis, starting with discussing progress and challenges in energy transition. So my question first will be directed to Dr. Karim. You will be presenting the regional report today, and we are excited to hear your insights. Given your extensive work and expertise in renewable energy, how do you assess the overall progress of energy transition in the MENA region? And what key findings stand out that you think will have the greatest impact on shaping energy policies and strategies moving forward?
Thank you, Hajar, for the kind introduction. Good afternoon, esteemed colleagues, participants, and experts. It's a privilege to join this critical dialogue on energy transition in the MENA region. The regional report analysis, which I prepared under the guidelines of MEPA Institute, highlights both significant progress and persistent challenges in the energy transition in our region. Over the past decade, there has been a remarkable surge in renewable energy investments, namely with solar and wind projects taking center stage. Countries like Morocco, Egypt, United Arab Emirates have emerged as leaders in this transition, implementing ambitious policies and large-scale projects to reshape their energy landscape. As you know, Morocco has set an ambitious goal of generating 52% of its electricity from renewables by 2030, leveraging its vast solar and wind resources. Egypt, with its strategic location and high solar potential, is accelerating its green hydrogen initiatives alongside large-scale solar and wind farms, aiming to position itself as a regional renewable energy hub. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates Energy Strategy 2050 targets 44% from renewable energy. We are talking here about Emirates, a kind of fossil fuel country, which take a good and a very important decision to switch to renewables in its energy mix, underlining its commitment to sustainability through flagship projects like Masdar City and Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Solar Park. Despite these achievements, the region, of course, still grapples with structural barriers that could slow down the transition, like grid infrastructure, which remains a significant bottleneck, as many national grids are not yet equipped to handle the high level of variability and intermittency of renewable energy. Without adequate transmission and distribution upgrades, the full potential of renewable energy cannot be realized. Because the issue here is not only about to produce electricity, but you should also do the transmission and the distribution. And all these levels should be, of course, updated to take into consideration all challenges related to the renewable energy. Additionally, energy storage constraints pose a major challenges as the intermittent nature of solar and wind power requires advanced storage technologies, namely pumped hydro, battery storage, and maybe in the near future, hydrogen solutions, of course, to ensure stability and reliability of these energy resources. Regulatory and policy challenges also further complicate the transition. While policy frameworks have improved gaps in coordination and standardization, it's a mean across this region, inconsistent regulation and fragmented market structure hinder private investment and slow down project implementation. To unlock the full potential of renewable, government in our region must work toward harmonized policies, streamlined permitting process, and also present a clear incentive structure that encourage private sector to engage to make the engagement. One of the most crucial elements for a successful energy transition in MENA will be the regional electricity grid integration and cross-border energy trade. By strengthening interconnections between national grids, countries can balance supply and demand more efficiently, enhance energy security, and also reduce reliance on fossil fuels. Enhanced regional cooperation, joint infrastructure projects, and shared energy markets could create a more resilient and sustainable energy system for the future. As a conclusion, while the MENA region has made remarkable strides in renewable energy, overcoming these structural barriers will require strategic investment, policy innovation, and strong regional collaboration. With the right reforms and, of course, infrastructure enhancements, and also the finance, which we'll talk later in other axes, the region can solidify its position as a global leader in the energy transition to a clean future. Thank you, Hajar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Karim. My question now would be addressed to Utman. Morocco has established itself as a leader in renewable energy in the MENA region, right? Setting ambitious goals for solar and wind energy. So, as someone deeply involved in this situation at MEN, how do you evaluate the overall progress Morocco has made so far? And what do you see as the most significant accomplishments? And how can the country maintain momentum as it heads into 2025?
Thank you very much for the kind introduction. So, I think to evaluate Morocco's journey, I think it is essential to look back at what historically Morocco has been able to achieve in the last quarter of a century. Um, since the late 1990s, Morocco has taken a strategic pathway, looking to be at the forefront of green energy development in Africa. In fact, trying to make the most of its large wind and solar resources. Morocco has committed to the development of renewable power, with commission in the year 2000, so very early, of the first renewable energy project wind farm called Abd al Torres. I think after the year 2000s, the momentum has slowed down for renewable energy development in the country. And after the 2009 nationwide energy policy, the focus has been on renewable energy and flexible baseload with natural gas being at the heart of that strategy. So beginning of 2010, I think Morocco, after introducing a new law, as everybody knows, called 1309, La 1309, that opened up the electricity market for renewable energy developers to commercialize the energy produced, whether to the state utility, ONE, or to a private consumer. Well, technically, the renewable energy produced by IBPs that is going to be sold to the state is sold to Mazen now, because there was a reform in 2016, which sells back the electricity to the state utility in a double PPA format. So today, the installed capacity of Morocco's renewable energy stands at almost 40% of the energy mix, not counting the step, because step are a storage and not a renewable energy, I'd say, capacity installed. So with an output of electricity to the national grid of around 23%. And the remaining 77% is from fossil fuels, where coal represents a staggering 64%. And that is from the latest report published by the national electricity regulator, ANRE. So the renewable energy output of Morocco, although relatively low compared to specific countries, is more or less equal to the European average of renewable energy in the EU electricity single market. I think for Morocco to streamline renewable energy development, several key elements must be taken into consideration. So the first thing first is regulation. So Morocco has, as I mentioned, the 1309, but it also has another law that was published in 2023, which is the auto production, the 8221. But still, the momentum hasn't picked up yet, in my opinion. So, and I say this with a grain of salt. So Morocco needs to work on streamlining secondary texts, what we call in French décret d'application, or in Arabic nusus tanzimiyya, mainly in laws 1309, but also, as I mentioned, for the auto production 8221, to give investors regulatory clarity. And this is of utmost importance. So we have to keep in mind that not regulating, meaning keeping the uncertainty, it has a cost for investors, mostly foreign investors that want to actually invest in the renewable energy space. So shifting gear to a more fundamental issue, which is electricity market reform. In my opinion, and this is also something that at the top level of the government and the state utility, it's been mentioned that Morocco electricity market has reached a certain maturity. So that perhaps keeping the vertically integrated model won't help to propel the country into another phase of energy development. And going into 2025, I think the system, meaning the public electricity system players, will have to assess how to bridge the gap between the financial resources needed to build a more modern electricity market, or keeping business as usual, which also has repercussions. So to conclude, I think Morocco has tremendous capabilities in solar and wind, but also in manufacturing batteries. However, finding the recipe to navigate market reform, regulation, financial requirements, it demands agility, which hopefully can be achieved soon.
Thank you so much, Atman. Very interesting, and I come back to you in a while. But now I shift to Egypt with Mr. Ahmed Sahran. Sorry for misspelling your last name. So actually,
ولا
I read
يهمك.
a lot. Thank you. I read a lot about the successful story of Karm Solar and how it started in 2011 in Egypt at a difficult, challenging national regional context. And due to time, I will not ask about how it started while I urge our audience to read about it. But my question is, Karm Solar was founded in 2011 in a completely different energy landscape, right? Technology was in its early stages, regulations were nearly absent, awareness was low, demand was uncertain, and energy prices were relatively affordable. But over the past decade, everything has changed, right? Renewables have become more mainstream, policy frameworks have evolved, and market dynamics have shifted. So, given this transformation, where does Farm Solar stand today, and how has the company adapted its strategy to remain at the forefront of Egypt's renewable energy sector? And what key challenges and opportunities define the current environment?
طيب هو يعني definitely يعني when the company started, as you said, the landscape was completely different, and we realized that the main problem with renewable energy, or renewable energy development in general, is that it is being looked at as a specific type of investment that is not connected to the rest of the ecosystem or the rest of the context. So one of the main learnings that we got is that in order for you to يعني transform renewable energy to become the mainstream source of energy, you cannot just think of renewable energy. You have to think of the entire system. So we decided to change ourselves from a renewable energy development company into a full-fledged power utility company. And by doing that, we started not just looking at renewable energy development, but also at power distribution. And when you look at power distribution, you are investing and designing the power grid as well, and not just renewable energy. And when you do that, you start realizing how the existing system is designed with fossil fuels as the main source of energy. However, when you start designing and thinking of the grid where renewable energy is going to be the mainstream, the design of the grid changes significantly, and how you think of the grid and the role played by the grid also changes. And I think that's one of the main things that we added to the existing business models. And that's one of our main contributions to how the business is being done today. Also, it affected the bankability of projects, and it affected the renewable energy penetration on the system and how it functions. And those are the things that we started focusing on. خلاص we cannot keep on thinking of ourselves as just a renewable energy company. We have to think of the entire system. We have to work on it from scratch, design how it's going to work with the suppliers, the technical and technology suppliers, to make sure that it is handled in a way that makes renewable energy the mainstream, or the main source of power. We think that what's going to happen is that eventually the role of the power grid is going to change in a way that is going to enable renewable energy to function in a different way. We also think that distributed energy is going to have an impact on how we perceive energy and how we perceive consumption. لأنه النهاردة, if you look at most of our system, you'll realize that the central generation is the main core of our systems. This is going to change. It's going to be distributed much smaller systems. The importance of the grid, or the existence of the grid itself, الريزون d'être بتاع الجريد is going to change with time. It will not be about the transport of electricity from points of generation to points of distribution. It will more be used for balancing the system and achieving the last mile efficiency of the system. So a lot is going to change, and that is quite important. لأنه we also had to think of how do we get that done, and we realized that The most difficult thing to do is to change the existing infrastructure. So we realized that what's easier than that is working on all the new investments. And in that point, I'd like to mention, the growth in the power demand in Egypt averages around 9% annually, which means that the power grid or the power demand in the country doubles almost every 10 years. So we decided to focus entirely on all the new demand instead of working on the existing systems. If you work on the new demand and if you grow within the new demand, which is big enough, you're talking about something between 1.5 and 2 gigawatts every year at least. You are able to design it from scratch in areas where the system does not exist. So you get to design it in the most optimum way and in the way that would make sense. So you get to prove your concept, and at the same time, you do not have to go with the inefficiencies and costs of retrofitting the things that already exist. We think that what's going to happen next is that we will take those systems and scale them up that we already implemented and designed in those new parts of the system. And then we will later move, once you have a critical mass or a critical investment in many areas, we will start moving into retrofitting the existing or the older part of the system.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. Very interesting. Now I want to move the discussion towards governance and policy frameworks and ask Ms. Yasmin Al-Amin. We are going to shift our focus to Tunisia now, which, like many countries, is grappling with a complex energy transition. Tunisia's energy sector has seen the emergence of renewable energy programs, but these efforts have been influenced by competing narratives, including neoliberal approaches focused on green extractivism and opposing calls for more democratic energy transitions and that emphasize justice and community ownership. Additionally, political shifts such as the move toward more centralized governance have impacted energy democracy and hindered more inclusive approaches. Yasmina, how do governance and political dynamics influence this transition?
Hi, Hajar. First, thank you so much for having me today. Thank you to Mipa and to Monica for organizing this. So like you said, I think in the past 5 years, there's been quite a lot of narratives shaping the energy transition pathway in Tunisia. And specifically since 2021, when the president seized power, and dissolved the parliament and changed the whole governance structure in the country, there has been a complete shift from what was supposed to be a shift or a transition towards a democratic system in Tunisia towards a more centralized system in the country. And this has deeply impacted the energy sector. So since the last 5 years, there's been major changes that have been ongoing and that we can say right now, nowadays, they're starting to materialize with specific projects that are shaping the energy pathway within the country. So first, I think with this shift in power, this has meant that there's been changes when it comes to the transparency that is ongoing in the sector. So this has definitely decreased with time, as well as public participation. But also, what has changed has been the sort of projects that are being proposed. So right now, I think we can talk about three main streams that have been shaping the energy transition in Tunisia. First, there's this focus on external priorities. A lot of the projects that are being proposed or on the table right now are dedicated towards energy production for export, whether it's the production of renewable energy that will potentially be exported through a project called El-Med, which is, Karim spoke about this, but he meant it on the region. But El-Med is a project of interconnection between Europe and Tunisia. And the point of this would be grid stability for Europe through energy imports from Tunisia. So this is one. The second project that is on the table is the production of green hydrogen. Again, major focus on export. And the third strand of, let's say, the third trend that has been happening is that most of these projects are being met through private sector participation. Now, from a governance and from a political, like from the political landscape perspective, I think through the project that we have done with ARI, the Just Transition Green Bridge project, we've heard a lot from civil society talking about the governance and landscape climate in Tunisia. And there has been an overwhelming consensus that throughout the past couple of years, there's been a shrinking space for CSOs, that there has been very little to almost none participation and consultation that has been happening. That energy decisions are happening really at a very high level, closed doors, that the sort of transition has been happening as in a very top-down way, and that information sharing, although they are constitutionally bound to share information about specific projects, they have not been happening. So all of these changes have been really key in shaping the energy transition in Tunisia. And I think this is quite worrying for multiple reasons. First, when we're talking about the ELMET project, I think the way it's being set on the table and the way it's being discussed is that it's a project that aims to decrease Tunisia's dependence on Algerian gas. Now, well, of course, a move towards renewable energy is always a good thing. Decarbonization is definitely a priority. But what a lot of people have been worried about is sort of replacing a dependency by another. So while, of course, the dependence on Algerian gas is not optimal, but replacing that with a dependence on renewable energy from Europe also has its questions. And I think actually if you check the news recently, Norway was not willing to be part of the EU market because there has been actually negative impacts on consumer prices. So there's been, because they were linked to the European market, there were very high prices, electricity prices as a result. And I don't think this has been seriously thought of in Tunisia. Second, when we're talking about green hydrogen, we're talking about big mega projects involving a lot of water. And Tunisia is one of the countries that struggles with water scarcity, like most of the region. So this is again something to think about, how much of these projects are meeting local demand rather than external priorities. So I think within this shift towards authoritarianism, there has been a focus on sort of accessing foreign funding, which had been stopped for quite a while. And this has resulted in sort of neglecting local priorities in order to be able to access funding to, unfortunately, meet the imposed European agenda. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Yasmin. Very interesting. And I want to turn back to you, Dr. Karim, and very briefly, based on the regional report that you've prepared, what policy trends do you see emerging in the MENA region, and what challenges should policymakers prioritize?
In the MENA region, of course, it's increasingly adopting more favorable regulatory frameworks. One of the most interesting experiences in Morocco, which already discussed by Atman, the government recognized that a clear and supportive policies are essential to unlocking the full potential for renewable energies. We have other countries like Saudi Arabia, Jordan have introduced a progressive regulation and incentive structures aimed at attracting private sector investment. Because if you want that the private sector to be involved in your energy space, of course, you should give a very clear and a competitive policy and regulation, which will reduce, of course, the construction time and will improve also the rentability of the projects. These measures include competitive bidding process, which almost of countries they use for feed-in tariffs, net metering, tax exemption, etc. Of course, there are many measurements that's already included in the region. In the report, we developed in details and we made a kind of comparison between these policies. Let's talk a little bit about Morocco, which stands out as a model for the public-private partnerships, successfully leveraging international investment to fund large-scale renewable projects. Today, we have what is that project with around 580 megawatts because of the public-private partnership. We are able to introduce more than 1,400 megawatts from wind because also for this public-private partnership, which played an important role in our energy transition and also for other countries like Egypt, like Tunisia, etc. However, this progress, of course, significant challenges remain, like bureaucracy barriers, regulatory inconsistencies, and excessive centralization. Same time, we should also, because of the nature of renewable energy, which is decentralized, even the policy and also regulatory scheme framework should be more decentralized, and we should avoid the centralization of this sector. There are also another point of view, another issue related to the permission process. In some countries, it's not easy to get the permit process or authorization, l'autorisation, the realization to realize the projects. All this, of course, all these points should be taken into consideration. To overcome this kind of challenge, I think that a robust and transparent governance framework is crucial. Governments must streamline administrative procedure, establish an independent regulatory bodies. Almost of countries, they already established the regulatory agencies, but not really operational. It means that that we have the institute, but is really this institute to regulate the markets? It's not the case for almost of countries in our region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Karim. We will get back to Yasmin concerning the centralized and decentralized aspects of energy transition. Mr. Ahmed, the energy sector has long been dominated by government-led infrastructure, but companies like Karim Solar are reshaping the landscape by operating independent grids and collaborating with both public institutions and local communities. So, in your experience, how can private energy companies work actually alongside civil society to drive a more just energy transition? And what role can they play in fostering sustainable development, empowering local communities, and ensuring that renewable energy solutions align with the social and economic needs of the people they serve?
I think it's the question here is awareness of the use of technology. So people are very smart in coming up with solutions that are relevant to their problems, and usually they are able as well to design solutions for their communities if they know what technology can achieve for them. And this is what we try to do. Because of the nature of our work and because we build grids in areas that are usually quite far away from the national grid and quite disconnected from the rest of the urban development, we get to see that. And we get to see how people can make use of what we bring to those areas in terms of technology, in terms of development, in terms of know how. We get to see how they can use it in order to further come up with different solutions that we did not necessarily think of. And I think this is one of the main problems is the awareness of what this technology can be used to achieve and how this technology could be relevant to the kind of problems that they have. We don't engage with civil society in the areas where we work. It's more a relationship that is based on hiring from those local communities. So when you hire from there, people get trained and they start understanding what we are working on. Then they start coming up with solutions based on the experience that they gain while working with us. Please note that one of the main impacts that we've had on the local communities where we work is that we changed a lot of temporary or seasonal jobs that were predominantly in tourism and sometimes in agriculture into permanent jobs as technicians in the energy sector or in renewable energy. And this made a lot of difference in the landscape of the availability of skills and skilled labor over there. لانه يعني over the span of the past 5 years there was an increase of the skilled people within those communities that understand energy, that understand grid design, and they started implementing those solutions where they are. But again, we don't really engage with NGOs or with properly organized civil society in order to achieve that. It happens, those things happen on ad hoc basis and based on community initiatives or individual initiatives. that are dependent on the know-how that we brought to those regions, but it's never really organized. And I would say it is intended from our side, because definitely we want to hire from the local communities. But the initiatives that they take were never intended by us. They were just a byproduct of that transfer of knowledge.
Great, great. Thank you so much. We move the discussion now to energy access, and my question will be directed to Mr. Atman. So the concept of just energy transition is gaining increasing importance, especially as Morocco looks to provide equitable access to clean energy. So, given the disparities in energy access between urban and rural areas, how can Morocco ensure that its energy transition doesn't have marginalized communities behind? And what are the steps needed to create an energy system that benefits everyone equally?
Thank you very much. So I think a key challenge facing Morocco is balance in the transition. Although I think we are more into a mitigating and adaptation category of countries than being on a transition to renewable energy, because historically those industrialized countries that have emitted for a long time need to take responsibility over time. I know this is a discussion of COP, so I will not get very politicized in this particular matter. But I think Morocco has done wonderfully, actually, when it comes to energy access. Um, I think it has made progress in providing rural electrification, and it has actually achieved almost universal electrification at, I think, 99.8%, with the last decimal being the hardest to connect in rural areas. And I think in these areas, um, we can try and put in place mechanisms that ensure that no one is left behind. For example, like targeted rural electrification projects, continuing and expanding projects as part of the national electrification program. That will be essential, and that will help reduce um, um, rural energy poverty by using both, whether conventional and renewable sources. Like if you need base load, you need mostly, and this does not sound very good, but you need thermal, which mostly in very marginalized region will be diesel, and you have also solar panels that would play a role. You have, of course, micro and off-grid solutions, which go hand in hand with rural electrification. So that helps also put in a border system in those particular areas where it's very hard to connect them to the grid. We have also an affordability constraint, and this is something that Morocco, I would not say suffer from, but has a big burden on its shoulders, and that is the affordability constraint. So providing subsidies for these particular marginalized um, areas would play a major role in giving them access to energy, or financing options that would allow them to electrify as much as possible and move away from very primal energy sources. You have also community involvement and education on how to utilize on these particular technologies, and ensure that these people have uh, the basic knowledge on how to utilize on these technologies. That is also, in my opinion, very important, especially when it comes to renewable energy. For example, solar panels, the deployment of solar panels in very marginalized areas that don't have access to the grid. And in the long term, I'm sure that it will ensure success and move the needle to the 100% electrification rate in Morocco.
Thank you, Atman, so much for this clarification. Yasmina, in Tunisia, grassroots energy initiatives face political and economic challenges. How can they overcome these barriers to play a bigger role in the country's transition? Can you discuss the role of community-led energy projects and grassroots movements in shaping Tunisia's energy transition? And what challenges do they face in the current political and economic landscape? And how can these challenges be addressed?
Sure. Thank you so much. I think prior to 2021, there was definitely the potential to having more community-led energy projects. Essentially, if even you look legally at the legal framework, there is a local collectivities code which outlines that municipalities have a role to play in addressing environmental challenges and sustainable development. But amidst the centralization of power and the centralization of decision making, this isn't happening anymore. This had happened before, specifically when it came to energy efficiency. Different municipalities with different, let's say, bioclimates were addressing energy problems in different ways. And there definitely could have been a lot of developments that could have happened. But when it comes to grassroots movements, there's been a lot that's been happening to shape the energy transition. And this is quite historical as well. This had happened in the fossil fuel era in Tunisia. Initially, I think, let's say, before from 2011 to let's say 2018, there were a lot of movements that were basically opposing the unequal distribution of the wealth that was created from fossil fuel projects, specifically in the south of the country. These movements were basically contesting the lack of job creation, the lack of local development. Even at one point, Tunisia was considering fracking, and then there was this whole movement that came out that was called Wain Petrol, that was basically contesting this, as I was saying, the lack of equal distribution of benefits of oil and gas projects. Now, when it comes to renewable energy, there has also been a grassroots movement led by trade unions, like a coalition of trade unions and civil societies and local communities that contested private sector investment in large-scale projects, large-scale renewable energy projects. And as part of the project that we have done with ARI and the Just Transition Project, we spoke to a lot of CSOs who were involved in these movements. And they were basically telling us that what they were doing is basically campaigning in different areas in Tunisia to speak to communities, to ask them to resist private or international funding of renewable energy project, warning them not to rent out their lands in projects that may not directly benefit these communities. And there are actually a few places like Burj Salhi and another one in Sekdud in different parts of the country where communities were really opposing these large-scale projects, claiming that they took agriculture lands, that they were creating competition with water in these areas, and that they were bringing no local benefits to the communities. Now, unfortunately, recently there has been a draft law that was passed that replaced a law on NGOs that has sort of restrictions on the formation, on the activity, and on the funding of CSOs, and it threatens their independence by allowing the government to interfere in their work. And since then, CSOs have been telling us that it's been increasingly difficult for them to operate in this climate, that there has been they've called it like a demonization of CSOs in the country. They even told us that right now, some communities are not 100% comfortable talking to them because of this uncertain and this sort of fear that is installed in the country when it comes to CSOs and to their work. But I think CSOs are still trying to work and create alliances. They're still trying to create knowledge and create and create access for communities about information about the projects that are being implemented. But in this specific political climate, I think it's become increasingly hard for them to operate. And this has sort of impacted the work of the CSOs. But what they've told us is that the only thing that they can do and the only thing that they are doing is sort of resisting these projects. The only thing that they can do is to stall the development of these projects, to be able to, they call it like to create a blockade. In the latest trends that they've been doing, they've sort of directed this focus on green hydrogen projects. They have started protesting in front of the ministry. They started targeting GIZ, which is seen as the main entity that has been promoting green hydrogen projects in the country. But unfortunately, this has been met by repression. This has been met by arrests. Some CSOs and some activists have been arrested. And so it's overall a complicated situation. But right now, I think in 2025, there is a pilot project linked to green hydrogen that is set to be implemented in Gabes. And this is an area which has been historically marginalized. And so I think what's happening right now is that a lot of communities are expressing their discontent with these kinds of projects. And this is what's happening right now. So it's a brewing ground and there's a lot of resistance, but it's still up in the air because of all of the uncertainties that are happening in the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will move to Ahmed. In a past interview, you mentioned that the value of energy is not in how we extract it, but in how we use it. And I find this philosophy both insightful and thought-provoking a little bit. Could you elaborate on this idea and how should we rethink our approach to energy beyond production and efficiency, considering its social, economic, and environmental impact? And what moral responsibility do businesses, policymakers, and communities have in ensuring energy serves as a tool for sustainable and equitable development rather than just a commodity?
Yeah, this is the problem with how we perceive energy, and this differs from one society and one community to the other. Um, when you perceive energy as an abundant and cheap resource, usually you get to design your equipment, your buildings, and everything as if as if it's available forever and as if it doesn't cost much, and that affects how societies behave, and it affects the sustainability of our societies. Look at the cars in the Gulf countries, for example. You'll find that they are used to owning big cars that are very inefficient, that consume a lot of gas. And that's because it is cheap. So they don't have to think of how much do they consume because the resource is cheap. And thus they don't have an incentive to become efficient. Now, the thing that we are trying to do is that we are trying to tell everyone that actually your economics become better if you think not just of the generation, but also of the type of use that you have. And this is important, especially when it comes to architecture. We have one of our companies is an architectural design company. It's called Carm Build, and we started that company because of this problem. It's not just a supply problem; it's a demand problem as well. How can you make sure that the buildings that we build require less energy or can function with less energy? And I'm giving this just as an example, but it applies to many other things. But you will see that the design of our houses in many places, including in Egypt, what it means to design a good house changed over time. And that has led to designs that do not match with the climate that we have, that lost touch with the designs of the previous generations that were more tailored to the type of climate that we have, and they were far more efficient than what we have today. And this is what we are trying to show, that the cost of a 1 megawatt station is the same. If you implement it across different countries, it's pretty much the same. However, the value that you get out of that 1 megawatt differs from one place to the other depending on how efficient you are. So 1 megawatt could be enough for, I don't know, 1,000 homes in one place, and they could be enough only for 300 homes in another place. And that depends on the design. It depends on how efficient we are, how aware we are of the resource, even if it is a renewable resource, because a renewable resource, to extract it, depends on capex investment as well. Now, how many $1 million do we have in our societies? And that's why we have to be smart about how we design the demand aspect of our society to make sure that we can make the best out of the resources that we have. You will find that societies with problems, or societies that are undergoing challenges, to be generally far more efficient and far more able to think of those things. And that's why solutions are probably going to come from countries with challenges like Egypt, Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, Libya, Sudan. the Levant in general. Those are the places where you're going to be getting a lot of solutions and a lot of adaptability because of the limited resources that we have. Again, I mean, the US in 2008 faced and in the 70s faced a challenge because exactly like the Gulf, they were used to a lot of consumption of energy without really thinking about its economics. Their infrastructure was designed not taking into account the cost of energy, and that led to two crises. One that happened in the 70s with the oil embargo because of the war between the Arabs and the Zionists, and the other one in 2008, right after the financial crisis. So again, this is an important aspect, and I think that within the coming 50 years, as part of the general change of how we see power generation and power distribution, this is going to be a thing that, or another solution that is going to come from our region. I know that, we don't usually think of ourselves as a place where technologies emerge or solutions emerge that get a global scale. But this is slowly changing, and this is slowly changing because people are starting to take matters into their hands. Companies are emerging that are trying to replace the role of the government in solving their problems and in coming up with solutions that better fit their needs. And energy efficiency is one of them. How can I get the maximum value of from my investment when it comes to our energy needs? Because energy and water are the pillars of the development of any society. The other thing is that we have a lot of land. Land is almost for free when you look at our countries, specifically in Egypt, Libya, and Sudan. And when you look at those countries, and the availability of land is giving a lot of space for creativity and coming up with solutions. And that's another thing that, in my mind, makes us quite qualified to contribute a lot of solutions that are going to be global in nature within the coming 50 years.
Thank you so much, Ahmed. I have another last question to you. You have been a strong advocate for not considering solar energy as the ultimate answer to energy challenges. And given your expertise, extensive work in off-grid energy systems, could you elaborate on why solar energy may not be the preferred fit for every region or situation? Very briefly.
Well, okay, solar is a granular source of energy, which is quite a good thing because it can be implemented on a utility scale, on a very big scale, and it can also be implemented on a much smaller scale. Um, when you look at the existing part of the system and our urban centers, you will see that the design of our buildings and design of our infrastructure does not give you a lot of space to install a lot of solar relative to the energy intensity of the same area. So you have to come up with other alternatives. And again, I'm always aware and thinking that yes, there are parts where we are growing in our countries, and that's because our energy demand is growing, and there is always new cities that are being built. There are always new areas where that you can develop. But there is still an existing part of the system, which is the bigger part of the system at the moment, that exists and requires retrofitting. I don't think that solar is going to be one of the main parts of solving that part. It will be through urban planning. I think that urban planning is an important aspect. I think solutions that have not been explored with a great extent, like for example, one of the things that we are going to look at is really small wind. Small wind could play an important role more than solar in many urban centers due to the existence of good wind resource while not a lot of space, and because they can better fit on buildings than solar. There is going to be, I mean, again, hydropower is another option. So again, because of the structures of our societies and the urban and the nature of the urban centers that we have, solar doesn't have to be the only answer.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ahmed. Yes, MENA. Lebanon's energy crisis is deeply rooted in both historical dependency and contemporary governance failures. For decades, The country has relied on imported fossil fuels, expensive and polluting private generators, and an unstable electricity grid, issues exacerbated by the 2019 economic collapse, the 2020 Beirut port explosion, and ongoing political paralysis. In this context, discussions about energy transition must move beyond mere technical solutions to address the structural, political, and financial barriers that prevent a fair and sustainable transformation. So, in the absence of a strong state led energy transition, local actors such as municipalities, cooperatives, and civil society organizations have been stepping in to provide solar and renewable energy solutions. Do you see these initiatives as viable long term alternatives, or are they simply stopgap measures in the face of state failure?
Thank you so much. I think what we need to keep in mind is that what happened in Lebanon in the face of the greatness of the crisis, of the collapse of the electricity sector, of the absence of the state, some have called it an energy transition, but it has been really driven by necessity. It has been a privately funded investment in renewable energy led by citizens themselves or businesses. And what's essential about this is that it has been something that has been deeply unequal. So, what happened in the absence of access to electricity, the people who could afford renewable energy solutions were able to invest in them. They were able to pay the very expensive bills of the generator, the very polluting generators, and they were able to sort of adapt. But what's been happening is that the people who couldn't afford it, who were not able to access funding, actually, there's a World Bank study that has done a survey to ask people on their usage of renewable energy, whether or not they've considered it, what has been the main obstacles in them adopting these kinds of solution. 73% of respondents said that the main reason they could not access these kinds of it's a huge upfront cost in Lebanon, ranging from $2,000 to $10,000, and lots of people couldn't afford it. And I think when we're talking about these decentralized solutions, we often forget about the urban poor. So the people in cities who most of the time do not even own their homes. And so considering these kinds of solutions is almost impossible for them because they have to pay rent. It's not even their homes. So it's very difficult for them to install these kinds of solution. Also, Beirut is quite dense. So the space that is available on rooftops in cities, again, is quite limited. It creates quite a lot of dispute between neighbors. So it's been a very challenging landscape. Nevertheless, lots of people have considered this. Some people have actually gone off grid completely. They have subscriptions with generators and they use their renewable energy. So they're completely no longer relying on the electricity that is sometimes provided to citizens by the EDL, the Electricité du Liban, the utility in Lebanon. But then again, going back to that World Bank study that I was referring to, they have done a sort of scenario analysis on Lebanon's potential recovery. And they looked at this distributed renewable energy system. So where individuals have the access to renewable energy. If there is there is a new law that was passed called the DRE law, the Distributed Renewable Energy Law, that allows for people to or individuals to produce up to 10 megawatts and to trade this energy, to share this energy doing through peer-to-peer and net metering. And they found that actually it is not the most cost-effective solution, that actually the most cost-effective solution would be to rely somehow on small scale and individual renewable energy solutions, but without the presence of a centralized utility scale energy solution. This is not only unfair, but it's actually not cost effective, and it would cost a lot for not just the utility, but for Lebanese in general. And finally, when we think about, just going off grid, we forget about the price that sometimes needs to be paid for electricity bills to be able to finance utilities. And if the people who can afford it just go off grid, then that price falls again on the most vulnerable people, and they will have to be the ones who pay the price. And we would not be able to shift away from this broken model that we have been stuck in, unfortunately, for so long. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your insight. Going back to Atman, you previously mentioned that Morocco has ambitious renewable energy targets, but scaling these projects requires significant financial and technical expertise. In your experience, what are the key financial models that are being employed to fund large-scale renewable energy projects in Morocco? And how can Morocco ensure that financial mechanisms are aligned with both the technical needs of renewable infrastructure and the broader goals of energy equity?
Thank you very much. So I think Morocco has established what we call um, renewable energy laws rather than public-private partnerships. So that is the sectorial laws. And there is a difference between a sectorial law. It is very confusing, but there is a difference in Morocco between a sectorial law and the public-private partnership. At essence, it is the same thing, but it does different things for different sectors. So Morocco, as I mentioned previously, has established the Law 1309, which is a kind of renewable energy public-private partnership law. It is not covered by what we call or what we have in Morocco as public-private partnership contracts law. That is more suited for other infrastructure projects. So Morocco has the 1309, which is a similar of a public-private partnership model. So the country has been successful in structuring projects in that particular way for the last decade and a half. And it doesn't pose any issue in regards to how to structure it, introducing also project finance and getting banks and international and DFIs, so development financial institutions involved, which was the case, for example, as Karen mentioned previously about the CSP plans. We have the World Bank that was involved and other financial institutions. So moving on, you have also other mechanisms to develop renewable energy projects or on the financing side, and you have what we call green bonds. So in Morocco in 2020, it issued its first green bond, which raised funds specifically for financing renewable energy projects. So this model aligns with financial interest, with environmental goals, and attracts international investment players. You have also, as mentioned before, DFI, so international funding and development banks. So Morocco has had DFIs involved in some renewable energy projects, whether the World Bank or the African Development Bank. And in this particular area, I think the public-private partnership, or what is at essence of this particular model, is the cost effectiveness of developing renewable energy projects, especially when you want to build on a public-private partnership. Morocco has also had bad experiences in this particular matter, especially for the CSP. But then that technology matured, Morocco has been focusing more on photovoltaic and BSS, as it is the case for Nor-Middle 2 and 3. So the prices are very low with very good energy storage technologies being involved. So that, as you can see, there is a learning curve, whether on the development of renewable energy projects, which also brings us to perhaps the next question, which will be on green hydrogen. So that learning curve is important. We make mistakes, but we tend to recover on the long term.
Thank you so much, Atman. Going back to Dr. Shukri, across the MENA region, financial incentives and investment frameworks vary. So based on the regional reports you worked on, what financing mechanisms are most promising for supporting energy transition?
Thank you, Hajar. Yeah, thank you, Hajar, and thank you also for Atmam regarding the overview about the finance in Morocco. For MENA region, of course, when we talk about renewables, The most challenge is the capex, which is very high. That means that development this kind of projects require really a huge and also a stable financial models. Innovative financials like public-private partnership, green bonds, sovereign funds, international development financing, or these mechanisms, of course, play a crucial role in mobilizing capital, mitigating investment risk, and also accelerating the deployment of green energy projects. As developed in the regional reports, the Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia are leveraging their sovereign funds to attract the foreign direct investments into renewable energy. Saudi Arabia Public Investment Fund has been instrumental in financing major initiatives like the NEOM green hydrogen project, said to be the world's largest green hydrogen production facility. Meanwhile, for in Masdar City has expanded in Emirates, has expanded its renewable energy portfolio across the MENA region and beyond, investing in large-scale solar and wind projects countries such as Jordan, Egypt, and Morocco. For the case of Egypt, of course, the country has positioned itself as a key player in green hydrogen production, securing financing agreements with the European and Gulf investors for projects in Suez Canal Economic Zone. Jordan also, despite its smaller economy, has successfully implemented private sector-led renewable energy projects and under, of course, the power purchase agreements. Regarding the case of Morocco, Uthman, he already underlined the case of public-private partnership, and I would here to discuss a little bit about the law 1309, because the most important issue regarding this law that the state is not financing anything. It's only give the authorization, which means that it's a private project. This law make a great successful in our case in Morocco, because we have a kind of very big consumers that they can conclude a power purchase agreement directly with the fournisseur, with the provider of the energy. For that, a private sector can today come to Morocco, build their power plant, of course, by their money. The country give only authorization and decision and the required documents, and then the transmission. It's of course there are kind of tax that you should pay to ensure the transmission of your energy. And today we have around of 1,200 megawatts already installed and under operation by this law, where the country have paid nothing. Thank you, Hajar.
Thank you so much, and most precisely, thank you for being brief. Going back to Atman and discussing the green hydrogen, Morocco has become a regional leader in green hydrogen development. How do you see the role of green hydrogen in Morocco's energy future, both for domestic use and for export? And from a technical standpoint, what are the most promising innovations in green hydrogen technology that could drive the country's transition to a clean energy economy?
Thank you very much. I actually have a strong opinion on this, and I think Dr. Karim knows very well what I think about green hydrogen. I'm not saying that it's not possible for us to do it. I think that green hydrogen development is more about electricity than it is about anything else. Of course, you have the technology side, but that's not something that Morocco can do anything about it. So we will, or the developers that want to develop their renewable hydrogen projects will have to bring their technologies with them, and the risk that are associated with these kind of technologies or very early kind of technologies. So Morocco is very well positioned. As you know, it has published a hydrogen roadmap in 2021, and lately it has published a governmental circulaire. I don't know how you can say this in English. So it is more of a governmental policy that was published in March 2024, or what we call the Morocco offer, which is basically the state giving out land for project developers to, of course, through a process to develop their own green hydrogen projects. So I think the problem with, or not the problem, but I mean, it is a problem. An issue with the green hydrogen development in Morocco is that we have, as I mentioned before, a lack of regulation. So we don't have a good regulatory framework that would help Morocco position Morocco to be a leader in green hydrogen. Although the technologies have not been yet fully developed. So we are still in that learning curve to develop technologies like alkaline, when it comes to electrolyzers, which is mostly the most, I'd say, important part of green hydrogen production. Or whether for its derivatives, if you want to export ammonia, that is also feasible. But on the volumes, if you want to export volumes, so millions of tons, or what Morocco aspires to do, be part of that 4% by 2050 of green hydrogen producing countries. You need pipelines and you need infrastructure. So you need to build everything from scratch. As in Morocco, we have very limited transport infrastructure. So that limits us, especially on the pipeline side. We have one pipeline that is linked to Europe, and that is the Gazoduc Maghreb-Europe, which flows natural gas, which is possible to also flow a certain percentage of hydrogen, but still we need to build more infrastructure in regards to the midstream of the value chain. And in this particular element, you have regulation, I would say barriers, as we don't have, for example, a downstream developed regulation when it comes not just to natural gas, but also to any gaseous molecule. And that poses a problem because we don't have the experience in these particular molecules, which do hamper a little bit the development, I would say, of green hydrogen in the midterm. Perhaps on the technology, you have storage that is also being developed. You have to understand that Morocco has a demand of green ammonia in Morocco, or ammonia in general, as OCP, the phosphate company, is one of the largest ammonia importers in the world, and to be exact, the second largest ammonia importer in the world. So we do have a demand, but still, how can we utilize on the infrastructure already in place and bring other international players so they can share the risk in developing these absolutely multi-billion-dollar projects is I would say is a headache for everyone, for the technology side, for the regulation side, but also if it's destined to Europe, you have another layer of regulation that would apply. So I won't get into the details of that, but there is certifications, there is a lot of regulation that Morocco needs to abide by for it to be able to send those molecules to Europe.
Thank you so much, Adnan, for your insight. Due to time, my last question will be directed to Yasmina. Given the country's reliance on external, I'm talking now about Lebanon, actually. Given the country's reliance on external energy resources, including cross-border gas agreements and non-state actors facilitating fuel imports, how do these geopolitical dependencies impact the stability and sustainability of its energy transition? And what structural or policy changes are needed to enhance grid resilience, diversifying energy sources, and reducing vulnerability to external political shifts?
Yeah, thank you, Hajar. I think definitely Lebanon's geopolitical situation is deeply entangled or has deep impacts on the stability of the energy sector. So actually the 2021 complete blackout that we went through was because Lebanon could not pay its bills to Iraq, where it was importing most of its fossil fuels. And again, I think it was in August where we had the same problem, and we were unable to pay to Iraq our bills. And we almost got into another near blackout. And overall, I think the country owes between 1.5 to $2 billion dollars to Iraq because of these fuel payments. And this is approximately 10% of its GDP. And in August, when Iraq said that it would suspend its fuel shipment again, instead of actually addressing the issue, the Lebanese state again it declared that it would no longer be able to supply energy to its population, and it got bailed out once again by the international community. Algeria proposed to give a certain amount of fuel to Lebanon. So all of this puts the country in a deeply unstable environment, which I don't think it needs to add instability to its already existing situation. And I think the solutions are quite clear. We don't need to reinvent the wheel. Organizations have been saying it long and time again that there are reforms that need to be done in the energy sector, specifically around UDL to improve its operational performance and its financial sustainability, but also about transparency. So I don't think it's normal for a utility to not pay the bills and to not be clear and to not report on these failures to submit payment. So I think these are the main sort of reforms that need to be in place, along with, of course, financial reforms and economic reforms that need to be done to address the currency issue that we're having and the liquidity issue that we're having in Lebanon. So I think it's quite a difficult situation. But now with the ceasefire, I think there's a different political climate, and lots of countries are now more willing to cooperate with Lebanon in terms of providing it fuel. But this is, again, quite a very volatile situation to be in, and it's nothing guaranteed. So Lebanon has to address this issue by investing in having more decentralized renewable energy solutions. But as you said, this needs to come with grid modernization, with the fact that renewable energy, as Karim mentioned it quite a lot of times, it's a very intermittent source of energy. So the grid has to be equipped to be able to deal with these intermittencies. So let's hope that our new minister or all these changes in Lebanon will come with actual reforms. And I must say, it's not something that requires a lot. It just needs tough decisions and political will to be able to implement them. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasmin. As you said, the political will is the most important thing to take into consideration for solving current issues. Thank you to all our distinguished speakers for sharing their invaluable insights. I have some questions from the audience. The first question I have here is, what are the main causes of the resistance to green hydrogen in Tunisia? Is it mistrust in the application or the fact that it will be exported? I think it's Yasmina.
Yeah, thank you for this question. I think there's multiple reasons. I think, first of all, I've mentioned that Tunisia has a huge problem with water, and I think this is a concern for all citizens. Lack of access to water is a big concern in Tunisia, and lots of people have this issue with green hydrogen because it's very water intensive, even though the government has said that they will use desalination to within the cycle of the green hydrogen project. But again, instead of investing in desalination for water consumption, they are doing it for green hydrogen and then again for export. So yes, then it's also a question of resources. National resources are being used for export purposes. And there's also something that I forgot to mention, that most of these projects are going to or are said to be implemented on agricultural lands. Lots of the projects are said to be implemented in the south of the country, most of which is agricultural land and collective land, so lands that are collectively owned by different individuals in Tunisia. And this, again, is seen by many as a sort of land grabbing, green grabbing, a sort of dispossession of local communities without proper compensation. And this is one of the main reasons where people are unsure of the local benefits that these projects are going to be used, and they're worried that their lands will be taken away from them without proper compensation and without investments in local development.
Thank you, Yasmina. Another question was, what are the geopolitical implications of the energy transition? And I think that we've already tackled that aspect. Another question is, can the energy transition in developing countries be considered a kind of new green colonialism? Mr. Shukri.
Thank you. Personally, I think that the energy transition in our region, it's not really a new form of green colonialism. It's a strategic opportunity for economic growth, our energy security, and also the global leadership. Our nations are not merely suppliers of raw material. We are active architects of our cleaner and more sustainable for the futures. Countries like Morocco, Egypt, Saudi Arabia have launched the broad national strategies for renewable and green hydrogen. Really not just for export, but also to power our local industries, create jobs, secure or ensure energy independence. Personally, this transition, it's our choice, our vision, and our future. Thank you.
Thank you. Yasmina, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I mean, I think Karim knows that I disagree. I think, I think that the projects that are being proposed can definitely not be extractive and can not be, but unfortunately, the way they are being proposed and the sort of trade-offs that exist can definitely allow us to think of them as a new form of colonialism, just because Europe has sort of what you call it, like has moved its project. They don't have enough land, so they see the global south and countries of the global south as sort of providers of cheap resources, cheap labor. And I'm very skeptical when it comes to green hydrogen about the potential of job creation. I mean, it's lots of people say that it will create jobs, but in terms of when we think about it, when we really go into the nitty-gritty of things, we know that probably they will create very short-term jobs in the first few years of construction, and then the actual sustainable, high-quality, good-paying jobs will be reserved for either people who are not living in the areas or people who are actually from a different country, mostly people who are from the global north, just because of the nature of the projects that there will not be any technology transfer that will be done. And so it's this whole system or this whole project where global South countries remain dependent on countries of the global North simply just because there's no technology transfer. We remain dependent, and even the way that these projects are being financed through loans is definitely a way to entrench inequalities and to have a sort of unbalanced and unfair relations between global North and global South. Sorry, Karim.
Thank you. Sorry, Karim. Thank you so much, Yasmina. Another question is renewable energy capable of achieving self-sufficiency in the coming years with population and economic growth? Maybe a question to be addressed to Atman.
So I think renewable energy, perhaps with the development of storage, can be a solution, but it is not the silver bullet. In my humble opinion, I think that we will still need a transitional fuel. That's why we hear a lot about natural gas. We will still need technologies like nuclear, especially SMRs, small modular reactor for perhaps countries in the global south. But all of this is about technology transfer, especially when it comes to nuclear and countries in the global north, given the ability to countries in the global south to deploy these kind of technologies. Of course, there's still elements of technology development, and of course, that technology development will still need more time for it to be commercialized and to be democratized. But still yet, as I'm sure you know, nuclear energy needs a lot of capital investments. So I cannot predict the future, but I'm very optimistic. I'd say that renewable energy with batteries will play a major role in countries of the global south as it is a mature technology. But for other technologies like nuclear, that will take, in my opinion, much more time.
Thank you, Uthman. Our last question is, how could we balance between our demands on energy and the public policy? Who wants to take this question? Maybe we can take a last perspective from all our guest speakers, a glimpse from Yasmina, then Shukri, then Uthman, to end the discussion. I will repeat the question. How could we balance between our demands on energy and the public policy?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think that within the topic of this webinar, I think we can always refer back to the concept of just transition and to sort of use it as a negotiating lever when it comes to the energy transition. I mean, I think Othman mentioned this, that the reason why we're dealing with climate change is not the fault of developing countries. We were not able to industrialize at the time that Western countries did, and now we have to pay the price of climate change. So I think using just transition as a sort of negotiating lever to have better access to finance, better access to technology transfer, better access to information. This can be done as a way to balance our own demands and I guess public policy. I think maybe it's meant within climate change. I'm not sure, but I think, yeah, these can be my closing thoughts and remarks on this.
Personally, I think that the key to strengthening that balance is smart, forward-thinking policies that consider, of course, both current needs and the future goals. When we talk about public policy, of course, we should incentivize the clean energy investment, support local industries, ensure that energy distribution is fair and equitable, etc. Which means that the main role of the public policy today is to feed all needs of energies to the country in of course in firstly in the best price, best cost, and also cleaner as possible. Thank you.
To conclude, I think that the balance between the demand, the current demand, and the public policy, and as a law practitioner, I think we just need to streamline regulation. That's what I think is at the center, I think, of a forward-thinking, renewably led strategy is that we need to give the certainty to investors, which help in tandem to actually build, I would say, momentum, which is extremely important, especially when countries in the global south are competing for capital to actually have renewable energy projects being developed. So I think this is extremely important. Regulation, regulation, regulation.
Thank you so much. As we conclude today's webinar on achieving a just energy transition in the MENA region, one key takeaway is that a just energy transition must be inclusive, ensuring that economic growth, environmental sustainability, and social equity go hand in hand. And this actually requires collaboration between governments, private sector actors, and local communities. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our esteemed panelists for sharing actually their expertise and perspectives, as well as to our engaged audience for your thoughtful questions and participation. This conversation doesn't end here. We encourage you to stay involved, explore further sources, and continue engaging in discussions that drive impactful change. Thank you so much again. We look forward to seeing you at our future events, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you also to our translator, by the way.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.